When an older person is in the hospital, everyone's emotions may be heightened. The best option in this situation, despite an imminent discharge, is for people to go slowly and give the older person time to express their wishes. In the following scenario, which takes place in the hospital, we see a social worker, but again, it could be any health professional, trying to help a family decide what the next best step is. And as you'll see, not all voices are heard, and the rushed outcome may have long-term consequences.
I've asked you here today to talk about your mum. She's ready to be discharged and she feels she'd like to go home. However, although she can't stay in hospital any longer, the doctors feel she may still need a little help until she's fully recovered.
Well, we'd love her to come and live with us, but we both work and there'd be no one with her all day. In any case, there's far too many stairs and that for Mum to get around the house. It just wouldn't be practical for Mum.
Yeah. Look, I think she needs to be somewhere where she can be taken care of. I mean, our boys are way too much for us at the moment. There's way too much noise and chaos. I mean, I feel really guilty because she took really good care of us, but I mean, I don't think I can look after her in my own home.
It's not an easy decision to make, especially when you're trying to balance what's best for your mum with what you can manage yourselves. However, your mum has expressed to me that she'd like to go back to her own home, to her cat and her garden, so there are a few options available. Firstly, we could look at a home attendant who'll come in and take care of the duties she can't manage at present and stay with her overnight. Your mum feels that this would be the best option.
No, never. Well, we don't want a stranger in Mum's home. And besides, the cost is completely out of the question. I mean, I don't think we'd have enough left in the estate to sustain her for more than a few years.
And you hear all of those horrible stories about old people being taken advantage of by their carers. That is not what Mum wants.
I want to go back to my garden and my Trixie.
Oh, Mum, sometimes I think you care more about that silly cat than you do about us. It's not fair that you make us worry all the time.
You don't have to worry about me. I want to go home and sit in my garden.
Mum, the house is too big for you, okay? You need a smaller place with people around you who can care for you 24/7.
Mum, we think you should go into a nursing home where you can make some nice new friends.
I don't want to go into a nursing home. I want to go overseas to Greece and
Mum,
before I
Mum,
die.
don't be
And
ridiculous.
Arlene's going later this year. And
Mum, don't be ridiculous. Can you see how careless she is with her own well-being? You need to go into a nice home. Look, at least try it. If you don't like it, then you can leave. Okay?
I don't know. I just don't know.
Mum, if you sign these papers, I can get things organised with the sale of the house, okay? You won't have to worry about anything. We'll find you a really nice place to live and a good home for the cat. And who knows, once the sale of the house goes through, you might have enough left over to go on that Greece holiday.
Jill, what can we say about decision making in this scenario?
I think the first thing is it needs to slow down, and that everybody needs to be given an opportunity to say what's bothering them and what they hope to achieve. I mean, in that scenario, the older person wasn't given any opportunity to say what she wanted. Indeed, when she did say what she wanted, she was contradicted or talked over.
What can we say about decision making in this scenario?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that there's no evidence from that particular piece of interaction that would suggest that the mother doesn't have capacity.
What about the interaction with the other people in the scenario?
It would suggest to me that she certainly was being pushed along at a very, very rapid rate by her son in particular, and that no one was listening to her, and no one was saying, for example, why is she concerned about her pet? What does that pet mean to her? Nobody was actually exploring from her point of view what her life is like now and what it would be like if she had to go into an aged care facility.
The social worker could have asked some questions to tease that out. What sorts of questions could she have asked?
Well, she could have asked how Mum was managing in more detail at the moment. There was no attention paid really to that. It was simply on the basis that she'd been in hospital and the next step would be a nursing home. And of course the big gap is what was happening at home beforehand, how was she managing, what assistance was she getting, who her friends are, who drops by, what does she do on an average week. We have no idea about that. So I think you would need to get a clear picture of what life was like and to what extent you can maintain that life given whatever longer term implications there might be in the future for whatever brought her into hospital.
So what else do you feel needs to be done here in terms of assessment?
Well, the capacity of the mother to make the decision about where she lives needs to be clearly assessed. In that context, from that interaction, you would have to say she has the capacity. The point of her current incapacity is largely physical rather than cognitive. And there's nothing to suggest in the scenario that she's not going to become more competent physically than she apparently is now.
At the beginning, the social worker put forward a scenario, but she wasn't really listened to.
She wasn't listened to by the relatives, and the mother didn't get a chance to develop what the social worker had said in any way, no. And I think probably the social worker perhaps could have tried to control the interview a little more and be less run over by the son.
So the suggestion that she go into a nursing home, well, what would happen then to her physical and mental health?
Well, we know that if people go into aged care when they don't wish to go into aged care, that it has very bad effects and that people sometimes curl up their toes and die, quite literally. So that to put people in a residential aged care facility when they don't A, want to be there and B, don't need to be there is very, it's cruel and it's not in keeping with the broad philosophy that we've got about aged care. For example, at the moment, the push to keep people with low care needs out of nursing home has meant that in this state, a lot of providers have something like 95% people high care. So she would be going into residential aged care as a very, very competent resident. And you'd have to wonder why she's going.
The son is pushing for his mother to sign over to him her financial capacity and decision making. Then he promises her, yes, there may still be a possibility of a trip to Greece. But aren't there problems with making such a promise?
Well, there are a lot of problems with that promise, and there's no reason on that role play that we saw. There's no reason to suppose she hasn't got capacity to manage her finances. So him saying she does or doesn't have money for Greece is really not his business. She's an adult. She can make up her own mind how she spends her money, and she can spend it foolishly or wisely, like the rest of us.
In this scenario, we saw a social worker helping this particular family, but really it could have been any health professional in that role. So what are the responsibilities of such a health professional towards the family?
The woman in hospital is her client, and not the family. The family is there to support the client, and it would be the social worker's job to ensure that the persons had their say and that they did get what they wanted within reasonable limits of the family's capacity to meet those needs.
Just as a final comment, there seemed to be a real sense of urgency to resolve this issue of the mother's financial capacity and to resolve it quickly. But did you really think that needs to be the case here?
In the context of this woman's life, and at this point in her life when she's had some acute health scare, doing things quickly would be a very bad idea. You really want to wait and see how much capacity, both physically and cognitively, she has, and that when that capacity is restored, she makes a judgment for herself about what she wants. If the capacity that's restored doesn't perhaps enable her to make a fully informed decision, then somebody should be with her in the context of this family and ensure that her rights are respected.
That's really great. Thanks a lot, Jill.